The moment she grabbed my wrist, I knew something was terribly wrong. Her face was pale, tears streamed down her cheeks, and one trembling hand rested over her pregnant belly. I had only been driving my best friend's wife to the hospital because he was supposedly stuck at work. But halfway there, she looked at me through the rearview mirror and whispered 5 words that changed everything: "Don't call him. Please, don't." If you enjoy emotional stories about kindness, second chances, friendship, and unexpected moments that change lives, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Sometimes one small act of kindness becomes the reason someone gets a second chance. My name is Daniel, and for most of my life, I believed I knew my best friend, Marcus, better than anyone. We had grown up together, played football on the same dusty field, survived college with barely enough money for food, and stood beside each other through breakups, family problems, and every foolish decision young men tend to make. When Marcus married Emily, I was genuinely happy for him. She was gentle, intelligent, and had a quiet warmth that made people feel safe around her. When they announced that they were expecting their first child, Marcus hugged me so tightly that I could barely breathe. He told me I was going to be the baby's favorite uncle. I laughed and promised I would teach the child everything Marcus had taught me, including how not to assemble furniture without reading the instructions. But over the months, I began noticing something I couldn't explain. Marcus became distant. He stopped answering calls, arrived late to gatherings, and seemed irritated whenever anyone asked about Emily. She, meanwhile, seemed to grow quieter. Whenever I visited, she smiled, but there was something behind that smile, something frightened and exhausted. I told myself pregnancy was difficult and that every marriage had private struggles. I didn't want to interfere between two people I loved. Then came the night everything changed. It was nearly 11 when my phone rang. I almost ignored it because I was exhausted after a long day, but when I saw Emily's name, I answered immediately. Her voice was barely audible. She told me she was having severe pain and that Marcus wasn't home. She said she needed to get to the hospital. I grabbed my keys and drove to their house. When I arrived, Emily was standing beside the front door, one hand gripping the wall and the other pressed against her stomach. She looked terrified. I helped her into my car and rushed toward the hospital. Rain hammered against the windshield, turning the streets into a blur of reflections. Every few seconds, I looked at her through the mirror. She was breathing heavily, fighting back tears. I reached for my phone and said I was going to call Marcus. That was when she grabbed my wrist. "Don't call him. Please, don't." I stared at her in disbelief. "Emily, he's your husband. He needs to know." She shook her head violently. "No. If he knows where I am, he'll come." The fear in her voice made my stomach twist. I asked her what she was talking about, but she only cried. For several minutes, she said nothing. Then she whispered that she had discovered something in Marcus's office 3 days earlier. Something she was never supposed to see. My mind immediately went to the worst possibilities. Another woman. Money. Some terrible secret. But what she eventually told me was far worse. Emily had found documents proving that Marcus had secretly taken out a life insurance policy on her. The beneficiary was not their unborn child. It was someone whose name Emily had never seen before. She had also discovered bank transfers from their joint savings account. Large amounts of money had been disappearing for months. When she confronted Marcus, he told her she was imagining things because of pregnancy hormones. That night, she found a hidden envelope containing copies of the documents. Before she could read everything, Marcus walked into the room. She said his expression had terrified her. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten her. He simply looked at her and said, "You shouldn't have gone through my things." After that, Emily stopped feeling safe in her own home. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I wanted to turn around, confront Marcus, demand answers. But Emily begged me not to. She said she believed he had been planning something and that she had been secretly saving evidence in case she needed it. Then another contraction hit her. She cried out, and I pressed the accelerator. At the hospital, nurses rushed her into a treatment room. I stood in the hallway soaked from the rain, staring at the closed doors. For the first time in years, I felt completely helpless. Then I remembered something. 2 weeks earlier, Marcus had casually asked me whether I would be willing to help him move some documents from his office to a storage unit. I had refused because I was busy. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now I wondered what those documents were. I called Marcus anyway, but not to tell him where Emily was. I asked where he was. His response came quickly. He said he was working late. But when I asked which office, he hesitated. Then he hung up. My heart sank. I returned to Emily's room. She was pale, exhausted, and terrified, but she was determined to protect her baby. She told me she had sent copies of the documents to an email account that Marcus didn't know about. She gave me the password and asked me to access it only if something happened to her. I promised I would. Hours passed. Then, just before sunrise, a nurse came running into the hallway with tears of relief in her eyes. The baby was coming. Emily was taken into the delivery room, and I sat outside alone. I kept thinking about Marcus, wondering how the boy I had grown up with could possibly have become someone capable of hurting the woman carrying his child. Then my phone buzzed. It was Marcus. He asked me where Emily was. I didn't answer. Another message arrived. Daniel, I know you took her. My blood went cold. Before I could respond, another message appeared. Don't make this worse. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I realized something that frightened me more than anything else. Marcus knew. Somehow, he already knew. I immediately contacted the hospital security team and told them there might be a safety concern. I gave them Marcus's name and explained everything Emily had told me. I didn't know whether I was betraying my best friend or protecting his family. Maybe, for the first time, those two things were the same. Several hours later, a tiny cry came from behind the delivery room doors. I stood up so quickly that my chair nearly fell backward. A nurse walked toward me smiling. The baby was a girl. Emily was alive. And both mother and daughter were safe. When I finally entered the room, Emily looked exhausted but peaceful. She held her newborn daughter against her chest and stared at her as if the entire world had disappeared. She looked at me and began crying. Not tears of fear this time. Tears of relief. She told me that for months she had believed nobody would believe her. She had been afraid that if she left Marcus, she would lose everything. She was afraid of raising a child alone. She was afraid of what people would say. But that night, when I showed up without asking questions, she realized she wasn't alone. The investigation that followed uncovered far more than either of us expected. Marcus had been hiding enormous debts and had attempted to arrange financial transactions using Emily's identity. The insurance policy had been part of a larger plan to protect himself financially if their marriage collapsed. He was arrested after investigators found enough evidence to charge him with fraud and other offenses. The friendship I had treasured for most of my life ended that day. For a long time, I hated myself for not seeing the warning signs sooner. But Emily told me something I'll never forget. She said, "You didn't fail me by not knowing. You saved me by believing me when it mattered." Those words changed the way I saw everything. A year later, I stood in Emily's backyard watching her daughter take her first steps. She stumbled toward me, laughing, and grabbed my finger with her tiny hand. Emily smiled. Life had not become perfect. She still had difficult days. She still carried scars from what happened. But she had built a new life, one based on safety, honesty, and people who truly cared. And I learned that sometimes being someone's best friend doesn't mean standing beside them no matter what. Sometimes it means having the courage to stand against them when they're hurting someone you love. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes that kindness can change a life, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness for more stories about courage, compassion, and second chances. And before you leave, I have one special request. Comment, "I will choose kindness," if you believe that helping someone in their darkest moment can completely change their future. Because that night, I thought I was simply driving my best friend's pregnant wife to the hospital. I didn't know I was driving a frightened mother toward freedom, protecting an innocent child, and learning the hardest lesson of my life. Sometimes the person you trust the most isn't the person you should save. Sometimes, the real test of friendship is knowing when to let go.